Hi, George Durkee back yet again with lesson 5 of our Geography 66 class on creating a web map. And believe it or not, we're closing in on it. And in spite of what 5 videos now, this actually goes pretty quick when you're doing it. You can do a web map in an hour, a basic web map, and get it out pretty quickly. So in this lesson, we're going to do some advanced labeling where we use arcade expression to create a custom label. And we are going to create a custom feature class of points, lines, and polygons. So that'll be your own feature class, and then we'll draw some points and polygons, maybe lines. But anyway, just to see how it works. And I'll also add a couple more feature classes to our map. Okay, we're back with our map, and as you may remember from our last episode, we had named the fires and decided on a font and a combination of halo and size, and that works out reasonably well. And now what we're going to do, you'll notice it says holiday. Now, it's probably obvious, this is a fire map, that it should be the holiday fire. But I'll show you how to just add the word fire in there. And to do that, we're going to use what's called an arcade expression, which is a computer language, a scripting language that will allow a lot of variability in what you do. So for that, let's go over here to perimeters and highlight it, and then that brings up the toolbars that are available. And if you're not there already, go to labels. And right now, we're on incident name as the field that the label reflects. But we want to add an expression so it says holiday fire. And to do that, you go to these little brackets here, which indicates an expression, and click on that. And up comes a new toolbox that allows you to write it in. So right now, the expression is the feature and incident name, which we know. And so we're just going to add fire to that, and that's pretty straightforward. So what you do is this language requires you put in a plus sign, and then I always put in a space. I don't think you have to. And then quotes, and then put in a space, and then add fire in uppercase, and then another space. Now the reason for the space in front of fire is that it's very literal. So if you have incident name without the space, it'll be the incident name running together with the word fire. Then you click on run, and let's see if it works. It does. South status fire is the example that comes up. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's see how it came out. There you go, holiday fire. Well, we might have made a teensy little mistake in that we made fire all uppercase, whereas holiday is just in title caps and lowercase. But let's go with it. We can fix it later. Now, arcade allows a huge amount of control over how you present various data. We're using it only on labels here, but arcade expressions are used throughout Arc nowadays. So looking at holiday fire, we know that there's a whole bunch of other fields available. So we could add in the acreage of the fire. So we'd have holiday fire and then the number of acres. Now this will get a little complicated, so stay with me. Once again, I'm just demoing what you can do and what you can do with labels. And so let's try this. Now, to add a complication to our lives, you have to know what the fields are. Now, obviously, you have the drop down here where it'll give you all the fields although we've now made it an expression. But this is where you go to current perimeters and show the table so you can familiarize yourself with the fields you have available. And then let's just scroll through there, and we come to calculated acres. Now the monkey wrench here, which you wouldn't necessarily know about, is that calculated acres, the field, is actually an alias. And actually the hint is that there's a space between calculated and acres. So the field names have to be all one word. So anyway, the way to find that out is to click on the three dots and go for the information. Now it says the field alias is calculated acres, and you go up here and you see that the field itself is GISAcres in the original. So write that down or remember it or whatever, because we're going to need it. And this isn't easy. The previous version of arcade labeling would list the fields as you were writing the expression, and for unknown reasons they got rid of that in the last few months. So here we are. Anyway, let's close that down, and we're going to add another. I'm sorry, we're going to go back to the expression here, and we're going to add to it. So once again, we add the plus sign and then a space. Now notice over here that you have the variable feature, which defines what comes after it in brackets. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in the $sign there, and that brings up feature, so that just draws it. Then enter in a bracket. Oops, I did an uppercase, it's a lowercase bracket. And then GIS, oh, see how easy it is to make mistakes here? Then in quotes, GIS acres. And then a space and another plus sign, and in quotes, space, acres. And let's run it and hope for the best here. Look at that, it worked. Okay, now we have yet another glitch here. Notice that we have a whole bunch of decimal points under our acreage. I don't know, what do we have there? 8 decimal points. So that can get pretty ugly. Oh, while we're here, let's fix fire. Let's make it lowercase fire. There we go. Okay, now let's take a look at what that does on the map. That's a bit too much. Now, there is a solution to this, and once again, for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to show you how to do this, and the idea is to show you that you can just do all sorts of things to adjust all of your data for labels and other things you're doing. So what we can do is we can round off or even eliminate everything past the decimal point. There's a specific arcade command to do that. So we'll try that. This is kind of head-bangingly frustrating. I'll just warn you ahead of time. The thing about scripting or coding or anything like that is you have to be absolutely exact. If you're a letter off, if you put a bracket in the wrong place, you're screwed, to coin an expression. So let's try it anyway. For the purposes of your assignment, I'm good with holiday fire. And if it just becomes too head-bangingly frustrating to do anything else, that's fine. But at least try it and see what you come up with. So let's get rid of current perimeters. Let's go back to our expression. And Also, if you notice, there was no space between fire and acres, and that's once again what I mean by just missing things. So what you can do there is put in a quote, put in a space, and then put in another plus sign. So you remember that it all has to be connected here, and we'll run it just to make sure. Yeah, so now the acres is separated. Now what we're going to want to do is to enter in an expression or a command that acts on the feature GISAcres to get rid of, or if we wanted to, reduce the decimal points to any number we choose. So after the plus sign, type in round. So we're rounding off that number. And then that adds the value of what we want to round off. Or I'm sorry, the value of how we want it rounded. Following me? So now we just enter number for a whole number. And then the format wants us to put in a parenthesis ahead of the value that it's going to act on. Maybe have a cup of coffee at this point. And so that value is the feature GISAcres field that it's going to act on. So we have two choices here. I've already entered in GISAcres, that's obviously down here. So we can either enter it in here in value, or can just continue the expression and make sure we get in the parentheses correctly. Because notice that it's got a right-facing parenthesis right here, and another right-facing one right here. So that means we need two to close it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enter those in on my own, and in the same format. So let's put in another, I accidentally erased it there, so let's put in another right facing parenthesis, and there's the feature that we want. And then at the end, we have the bracket still, so we put in two left-facing parentheses. And don't worry, I will write this whole expression out both in the instructions on Canvas and in the text of the YouTube video. And as I say, if this just becomes too headbangingly difficult, then don't worry about it. Okay, let's run it and see what we end up with. Aha, and it worked. Notice that the acres have been rounded off to a whole number. The word acres is in there, and let's call it done. Yay us. I'm always pretty amazed when these things work. Okay, so as I said, that's complicated. It would be great if you could do it, and I'm hopeful, and I will provide you with a full expression. In fact, you could just copy and paste it into the expression there, and that'll be fine. But it would be great if you wrote it out yourself, just to get an idea of what goes into an expression and how easy it is to mess up if you forget a bracket or a plus sign or anything like that. So once again, for the assignment, I want you guys to change the symbology on one of the feature classes that you add. So for instance, here I've got I added power outages, and let's look at, here are the styles. They're planned and not planned. So if you go into picking a style here, as we did with the fire perimeters, you could just change those to different colors. And then, for instance, you could add a new label within the planned and not planned polygon for power outages. And I add power outages as a useful feature class for FireMap because often it's really one of the first signs that a serious fire is getting underway, even before the perimeter maps are out and the first crews are on scene. PG&E in Northern California cuts the power to the area to reduce starting other fires, de-energize the lines so it's easier for firefighters to work. So when you start seeing power outages near a reported fire, that's often a sign of a pretty good sign of where it is. And then the other feature class I added, let's fold that up. It was California Fire Perimeters All. Now this is a huge data set and includes all fires in California, historical fires since the 1900 or even before. They've just gone through all the records and recreated them. It's a cool data set. Looks like it's actually the whole West. In any event, it's a huge data set, and you can see the concentration of fires. But it's so large that it's still useful, of course, but you might want to look at discrete fires for given decades or periods of time and filter out other fires. So I'll show you quickly how to do that. So let's take a look at how we can both reduce the clutter of a map and bring out data that we might want to show that might show a trend. So for instance, in this case, fires over time might show the effects of climate change, hotter, drier, windier conditions on fire size. So we highlight fire perimeters all, and and then choose filter, and then add expression. So what I'm going to do here is go down to GISAcres and choose is greater than, and let's look at fires greater than 50,000 acres and see. And so that shows immediately here, and let's save that. And then it rebuilds. And so that's all fires greater than 50,000 acres. Now let's take a look at it over the last 10 years only. So we add another condition here. So let's go to filter, and we'll add an expression. And we'll look at decades, and this is subdivided into decades. So we'll look at 2010, this decade. We'll save that. And those are the fires over 50,000 acres just in one decade. So anyway, what you can do is build a decade by decade look, or since a given year, and just see how a trend goes. And again, that's using filters. And so pretty useful tool to have. And because I can never help myself in tinkering with symbology so it looks like what we want it to look like and distinguishes various layers, let's look at current perimeters. And we want to distinguish the two. And it could well be that the hatching with the current fires versus the empty polygon for the historical fires is enough. But consider changing that to a hatch fill with the gray to make it look older. Done. And then we'll change the solid stroke to red. And so now you have kind of looking like an older fire with the solid gray there. Anyway, just a thought. Don't get too carried away, but and you may not even want to use this feature class. And now finally, and at long last, let us save our map with what we have in there. And we're now going to move on to creating our own feature class that we can draw in our own geolocated polygons, lines, and or points. And after having saved it, let's do one more thing under Share the Map. Right now, the default when we start a map is just the owner, so only you can look at this. You might want to expand this to the organization, and when it gets ready for prime time and or you have information you want to share to the public, you go to everyone. But right now, since we're still heavily in editing mode, let's just keep it with owner, so we'll cancel out of that. So when we create our feature class of points, lines, and polygons, let's get back to kind of a blank spot so we can draw them in without interfering with our fire stuff. So in this case, let's go back to Sonora. I've already got it up there. And we'll zoom out just a bit. We'll save our map because we won't be on our map for a few minutes. So we'll create a feature class from within contents. So for that, you go to your three horizontal bars there and go to Content and right-click and open in a new tab. And now we have a couple of choices under Create. We can create an app, and we'll do that later. That's how we create the app, the public-facing web map. But we want to create a new item. And of these, we have more choices. We specifically want to create a feature layer and yet more choices here. We'll want to define our own, build our own, but we can also bring in schema, which is the fields, how a feature layer is going to look and the data types that will make it up. We can bring them in from other places. We can do a template or a URL for an existing feature class, and we just want to use the schema. But we're going to define our own here and go to Next. And so layer 1, let's call it points 1, and that's going to be a point layer. Then we add, and then it'll be line 1, and make sure you change that to line. And finally, polygon 1, and again change it to polygon. We won't be adding GPS metadata fields for a live capturing of GPS receiver information, but it's becoming a good practice to enable z-values. That's your vertical elevation field. And so let's enable that, because if we want to create a map scene, a 3D map, and scene is what Esri calls their apps in both ArcPro and AGOL that will show terrain in 3D. So next, we'll give it a title, and let's call this Points, Lines, Polygons 1, Draft 1. And at the moment it has us in web maps, but as I mentioned earlier, let's put that into data, because it could be that you don't want to use it only in this particular folder of web maps. You might find this data useful elsewhere, and you might want to access it. So keeping all your data in one centralized folder is a good practice. And let's just put test point line polygon, and we'll save. And it clicks and whirs for a while and brings us back to our dashboard for each feature class that we've got. And in this case, we have the full rights to it, and so we can edit everything. It tells you what's in there: points, line, and polygon. And it also gives you a URL to where others can use it once you share it, either within the organization or the public. But we also want to build out our feature class a little bit, so you go to Data, and right now it defaults on Table, which shows you what's in there, but we want to add fields to it. So to the layer points, let's add a field called Label, and the display name will be Label. And you'll remember back when we were doing arcade expressions and the GIS acres field was given a alias of calculated acreage, but in this case the display name and the field name are going to be the same. And we'll keep it as a string type, which is text, but you can also do date, double, which means it'll have decimals if you want to add them, an integer, a whole number, or a string. So we're going to do that. I'm sorry, we're going to do the string. And you can also enter in a default value if you want. Now let's move to align, and for that we'll do the same thing. We'll add, and we'll just call it line label just to distinguish. Oh, and also the length here, 256, that's actually a pretty big field. You probably don't need all that. You might need just say 25 or 30 for a label, but we'll add that field. And polygon, let's add it as both a poly date is the field name, and you want all one word. Polygon, well, let's call it date of drawing, and we want that to be a date. We don't have a default value, but you'll notice that a calendar comes up, and that's how it'll show when we enter in data. And allow null values, that allows nothing to be entered. It doesn't require anything. So we'll add that as a field. And let's also add a string for label. Poly label polygon label. Okay. So after we've created our new fields and completed our feature class, you also want to go to Settings, and that determines who can use it, who can edit it, and so on and so forth. Right now we have this only the owner can edit. So you want to start out, prevent this from being accidentally deleted. So if you happen to hit delete when you're in your table of contents, it'll challenge you. Are you sure you want to do this? So stuff like that. Public data collection, approve this layer to be shared, not at the moment, and for us probably not ever. Enable editing is checked, and that'll become important later for your public-facing app, because you don't want that to be edited. And then you can decide who can edit features and what kind of editing is allowed, and you can narrow it down to just certain, just the attributes or attributes and geometry, and whether they can add, delete, or update. So update only means they can't delete anything and maybe mess you up. Anyway, some other restrictions there that are pretty important, and whether the data can be exported. But I wouldn't, I'd just accept the defaults for the moment. And let's save. Any changes you make have to be saved. Let's go back to Overview and test point line polygon. Well, that's not good. Let's edit that. Polygon. Save. Okay, now let's go back to our map, and we're in Sonora with some places to be able to draw in. And let's add, browse layers. And so you'll notice now my content will now be filled with your points, lines, polygon, draft 1 feature class. So go ahead and add that. And we'll get rid of our layers here. And up on the right comes the default symbology that has been attached to it. You can change that, and we might, though you already know how to do that, so I don't think we'll take up more time with that. But now what we want to do is actually edit. So highlight your points, lines, and polygons, and we're going to want to edit. Now, there's a similar tool, which is Add Sketch, and maybe we'll go over that later, but I don't want to overdo this particular lesson. The Sketch tool puts a georeferenced sketch, point, line, polygon, even text on the map, and it'll move around on the map, but it's not part of a feature layer. So we're going to want to edit our draft 1. And so let's choose new feature, point. And we go out here and establish a point and a label, and let's call it, I don't know, Sonora North. And we create it, establish the point. And now let's do align. And you click once to establish the line, click a second time to change directions, and double click to end it. And so that's all held within a box there. And you can hit delete or escape to end it, but you know, we're just doing rough sketches here. So, but you can also move the whole thing if you want to while it's active. And then you can add a line label. So we'll put Sonora line. We're being really creative here. And I already drew it, so I'm updating. Otherwise, it would say create there. And finally, let's do a polygon. So click on polygon, and it's the same idea, except you'll want to complete the polygon. And so then I'm going to double click to finish it, and polygon label, and we can put in a date. So let's put in October 2nd. And it gives a timestamp as well, and a polygon label of Sonora polygon, and create. And let's save. Okay, so that's it. So for your web map, I'd like, as I said, and this will be in the written instructions, but in addition to your changing the symbology of at least a couple of those feature classes we've brought in, also add a label at least to, let's say, the line and polygon, and the method is the same, to add labels to it. You'll go down and highlight, and then go to labels, and then add a label, and so on with that, which with luck you know how to do. And so that's it. So I want a point, line, and polygon on your web map when you turn it in, and I'll go into details of how I'd like these web maps turned in. So that's the end of the web map series, and next we'll go on to building an app. So thanks.